Okay, so you know that one episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob's inner world is depicted as an office staffed by tiny SpongeBobs, and then they're instructed to throw out everything except for fine dining and breathing? Well, replace fine dining and breathing with please shareholders and make number go up, and you basically have the games industry right now. I've recently had a lot of people be like, Anna, you freelance, right? I'm thinking of doing that too, because when there's no job security at all in an industry that doesn't reward you for longevity at a company anymore anyway, why not work for yourself? And I can't exactly go against that logic. I've been full-time freelance for more than 4 years now. For those who don't know me, hi, I'm Anna. I'm a senior freelance writer and narrative designer for video games. I've been doing this for a good while, and I've written for everyone from the tiniest of indies to absolute giants like Nintendo and Netflix, so I really hope I know a bit about what I'm doing. However, I am not a tax, finance, or law professional in any way. Everything that's in this video is just stuff that I personally do or is advice that I have received from a long line of freelancers that came before me. But all of this is to say that your mileage may vary, and please do not sue me. Also, it's worth noting that I specifically am a writer and narrative designer for video games based in the United States. While there are lots of freelance tips that are very high level and will probably work for everyone regardless of situation, some of these may be specific to games writing or living in the United States. So please keep that in mind. I can only speak from my own experience on Forge. This term is actually pretty old and was indicative of a knight who didn't have any royal or feudal affiliations and basically would fight for whoever paid them the most. A freelance. These days, a freelancer is its own noun, but you also might be referred to as an independent contractor or just a contractor. But it's mercenary work first and foremost, and to be honest, there's a lot of benefits of working this way as opposed to on staff at a traditional company. You can set your own rates and hours and can work from anywhere, which makes it super flexible in terms of employment. You also tend to have a bit more creative freedom with the projects that you take on, and you're also able to be more picky about what you do and don't want to do. And of course, because you're often only working for a little while on a project, you can rack up the credits pretty fast, as opposed to the typical 4 to 6 year dev cycle that's pretty normal in AAA productions. This can be helpful for those who are trying to break into the industry too, as you can get a few shipped titles under your belt pretty quickly. But there's some serious things to take into consideration with this kind of work as well, and a lot of these can be deal breakers. It's not all flexible working conditions and endless credits. Being a freelancer basically means you have no consistency in your career, and that includes income. Budgeting becomes both incredibly important and virtually impossible, as you don't know how much or for how long you will have money coming in. There are also startup costs associated with kickstarting your freelance career, and you will get no benefits from an employer. That includes things like healthcare, retirement, etc. That'll all be on your dime. You also have to be your own promoter and constantly looking for work while often working multiple gigs at once. And hustle culture can be super toxic. And you also have to pay your own taxes. Don't worry, we'll get to that! So freelancing is not for everyone. And I totally understand if it's ultimately a leap you don't end up taking. But what's important is the informed leap. That's why I think it's important to know all of these things up front. So let's say you've either already decided to make the leap or you want to get more of a preview of said leap before you make the decision. Let's kick things off with the most common question I get asked. How the heck do you even determine what your rate is? Well, the answer to that, you actually have several, and even then, it's ranges. It's pretty typical to have a rate sheet or just a list of pricing you feel is fair to you. Don't worry, I'll break it down. In the games industry, people often bill hourly. This is gig work, after all. It's pretty good practice not to put a hard number on your work, like $40 an hour. Instead, consider a range that you'd be comfortable with. For example, $40 to $75 an hour, where any number in between you would be fine with based on your experience and what the particular job entails. To find the bookends of these ranges, consider your lights on rate. This is the lowest comfortable rate you'd accept, considering that you need to keep the lights on. You can multiply that number by 40 to determine how much you would make in a standard work week with that amount of money. This is your bottom rate. Do not ever work below this. Then, once you have your lights on rate established, consider your high-end rate. This is based on what you could charge a flashier client based on your skills and experience in line with their budget. This number is obviously much softer than your lights on number. If they offer more than this, take it. Sometimes projects may ask for a day rate. In this case, take one of the numbers from the range above and multiply it by 8 hours a day. That's your day rate. And of course, if it's a rush job or the client is difficult to work with, you can charge more for the inconvenience of it. And for my fellow writers, sometimes in certain fields like visual novels where there's lots of dialogue, or with character-based writing like in localization, they may ask for your rate per word. 10 cents a word USD is the absolute bottom of the barrel. Do not go below this, and scale based on experience. One way to figure out what the current market rate is just to ask your fellow freelancers. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this, and people usually are very open about what they charge in order to keep things fair. But be sure to ask folks with around your same experience level for most accurate results. And of course, keep in mind the cost of living in your area. If you live in Los Angeles, your base rate is probably going to be a lot higher than someone who lives in Tuscaloosa. You can also ask the potential employer. In certain states like California and Washington, they're required by law to tell you what the pay band is on job listings should you ask them or during a recruiter call. But the general rule of thumb is never be the first person to give a number. Now, let's get to the next. If your first thought is, oh my God, what the hell is that? You're not alone. An LLC is short for Limited Liability Company. This is a company structure that shields the owner's personal assets from business debts while also giving you the tax benefits of being a business. Here in the United States, if you make an LLC as a freelancer, you'll often be making what's referred to as a single member LLC or a sole proprietorship. And you might be like, Anna, why the hell would I need that? I'm making video games here. And the answer is, you might not need one. But here are some things to consider. LLCs offer you some benefits, namely legal protection. Functioning as a small business instead of an individual gives you certain protections should you, heaven forbid, end up in a lawsuit. It would be your business that's involved in the lawsuit, not you as an individual, which means that your personal assets couldn't be tied up in the terrifying hellhole that is IP law. Additionally, functioning as a small business gives you lots of tax benefits as a single individual as opposed to being taxed as an individual freelancer. This can save you a lot of money. This also allows you to more easily write off certain expenses as operation costs in order to save additional money on taxes. Here is a non-exhaustive list of all the things you might be able to write off. Check your individual state's laws to see if these are applicable in your area. And while this is a lot less tangible of a benefit, having an LLC can make you appear much more professional and credible as a freelancer. This can be important when working with higher profile or flashier clients. But the LLC route comes with its own hurdles. You'll need to be comfortable doing a lot of your own admin, and there's definitely a startup cost involved when it comes to filing all of your paperwork with your Department of State. You can check up on the costs and fees associated with establishment in your state to get an idea of what you might be looking at. But let's say you're interested in going ahead and making one. Now, you can pay a service like Rocket Lawyer to set up an LLC for you, but honestly, I established mine in the state of Washington and I was able to do all of it myself for way cheaper. Your state's website should be able to tell you everything that you need in order to establish an LLC. So you might need something different, but often you'll need to file to open a business with your state, a state and sometimes city business license, a mailing address, a P.O. box is safest, and a registered agent. A registered agent is the person who's on deck to be contacted in case someone needs to serve you papers, legal notices, etc. This information is, of course, publicly available. So it's typical that you hire a third party so your personal address and contact information isn't just out there for the world to see. There are professional services that will do this and usually cost an annual fee. Sometimes they even offer P.O. box services and filing certain compliance documents on your behalf as part of their packages. These should be considered as part of startup costs and they're a business expense. Oh, and one huge thing. If you open your LLC and you're going to start taking contracts, always be sure to sign the contract with the name of your LLC, not your personal name. Otherwise, what's the point of opening the dang thing? Another thing to be on the lookout for with contracts is exclusivity clauses or non-compete clauses. You might have heard about these due to changing legislation around them, but it's always good to keep an eye out. It's uncommon to bump into one of these as a freelancer, but on occasion, especially with larger companies, these will be in their boilerplate contracts. Essentially, they mean that while you are working as a freelancer for their company, you're not allowed to work on any other projects. As a freelancer, this is often a no-go. So if you see this in your contract, ask them if there's room for negotiation on it. In my experience, places are often very willing to work with you on it or to strike the clause completely so you can make sure getting a new gig won't disrupt your other concurrent projects. Now, if all of this sounds like a lot, don't worry. You don't have to open an LLC first thing. I didn't open one until I started freelancing full-time. You can always see how it goes and then open one up if you see the benefit once the money starts coming in. Oh, yeah, I guess we should talk about... All right, people's either favorite or least favorite subject.
Money!
A bit of a segue from our last topic. If you establish an LLC, you may want to get specific bank accounts for your business. You can take your establishment documents to your banking institution of choice and ask them to help set you up. That's what I did anyway. This is an important step, as if you have an LLC, you want to make sure that your contract income comes into your business accounts. Then you can pay yourself to your personal accounts. With single member or sole proprietorship LLCs, you don't need to have business bank accounts, but the IRS recommends doing so for better income and expense tracking. As I mentioned earlier, I hope you're ready to do a lot of your own ops and admin. One major area you're going to need to get comfortable with is billing and invoicing. And let's be real, it's uncomfortable asking people to pay you, but you gotta do it. And it definitely gets easier with time. A lot of folks like to create a fancy invoice template using a platform like Canva and sending it via email. Or you can use an invoicing or bookkeeping software to keep everything in one place. This definitely makes things easier come tax time. Bookkeeping software is actually pretty easy to come by these days. PayPal, QuickBooks, and Wave are some of the ones I can think of off the top of my head. There's usually some kind of freemium component in my experience, but keep in mind, if you do end up paying for these softwares, that's a tax write-off as well as it's a business expense. These softwares can also automate keeping track of your expenses, and a lot have apps that you can use to take pictures of receipts to log them. I personally like to keep a physical copy of the receipts in a file because the longer I'm in this career, the more I don't trust machines. I keep them all through the year so that when tax season comes around, all I have to do is tally them up. Here's my folder from 2024. Receipts inside are grouped by category. A CPA or certified public accountant can help you figure out everything you can write off in your state. But keep those receipts organized. This is also my segue into... Okay, this is the part you've been dreading. And again, this is likely not applicable to folks outside of the USA. Sorry. Let's take a deep breath. Let's start with federal. As noted, I strongly recommend establishing a relationship with a CPA or a certified public accountant, even if you just talk to them once a year to file your taxes. Although some of them also offer bookkeeping services. Don't go to H&R Block. If you have freelancer friends that live in your area, ask them who they use. Otherwise, find a reputable local CPA. Honestly, websites like Reddit are shockingly good for this. You can also use nationwide services for freelancers like Brass Taxes. Moving on to state. If you have an LLC, you'll also need to file monthly with your state, usually through the Department of Revenue. This is known as a state excise tax. Otherwise, you may be obligated to pay estimated taxes quarterly. Check with your specific state to see what you'll be required to do. If you're working on a contract where you'll be required to pay your own taxes, such as a 1099 or just a verbal agreement, the 25% rule is great to keep in mind. When you get paid, calculate 25% of that gross amount. Then take that and put it into its own savings account. I use a savings account attached to my business bank accounts, but you can always open up a savings account with your personal accounts too. Once that money is in there, do not touch it. That money is not yours. It was never yours. The tax machine will eat it. Consider it gone. This savings account will make it so that when tax season rolls around, you have a reserve ready to pay for any taxes you may owe. And then, if you have any extra left over after tax season, you can give yourself a tax return out of that money. At this point, you might be like, okay, but I kind of have to get work done before I have to worry about taxes. And that's why up next, I'm going to talk about... Usually when people ask me how to find work as a freelancer, my answer is any way you can. But before we get there, there's definitely one thing that's really foundational: putting yourself out there. Social media. It might sound weird to use social media to get work, but that's kind of how things function in the games industry. I don't know why, it just is. Back in the day, the disaster formerly known as Twitter was a fantastic way to network and find opportunities. Now, not so much. And while several Twitter alternatives have come and gone, the alternative that most game devs have stuck to is Blue Sky. So set yourself up with an account and follow the people and studios that you'd like to connect with if you haven't already. You'll be surprised how far just being funny, nice, and personable online will get you. If you're just trying to break in, I also really recommend befriending the fellow up-and-coming devs within your discipline. These people are likely to become your colleagues and even friends over the course of your careers. I fell in with a cohort of other game writers, and we're all pretty much ride or die for each other to this day. Eliminate the competition mindset as early as possible, and it will get you so far, I promise. Rising tide raises all ships. When it comes to your presence on a site like Blue Sky or the other place, here are some tips. Here's my bio, for example. I have that I'm a freelance writer and narrative designer first. It's eye-grabbing. Then I put where I currently am. If I was looking for opportunities, I'd do the best practice, which is hilariously just putting looking for work next to your display name like this. But hey, it works. In your bio, make sure that you have your personal website or a link tree front and center. You'd be surprised how often people miss out on work just because they don't have their materials and contact details readily available. A lot of people keep a pinned post on their profile with a brief summary and link to their site, like mine, where it becomes obvious that I'm apparently pathologically allergic to letting my entire face be in the frame for some reason. Basically, try to keep this stuff readily available so you can remove as many barriers between yourself and a potential employer as possible. Make it easy for them to contact you. Most of this is also useful advice for LinkedIn, but to be entirely honest, LinkedIn isn't as essential for the games industry. Sure, have a page and check it out every once in a while, but most hiring doesn't happen this way in my experience. What you will need is a personal website, somewhere that you can host your resume, portfolio if applicable, and the like. You can set one of these up in an afternoon, even if you don't have any web design experience, and you can peruse the sites of other game writers to see what they use. Card, Squarespace, and even just a link tree tend to be pretty popular options. Keep in mind, any costs associated with hosting a website or a custom domain, they all count as business expenses. So let's say your social media and personal website are all set up. Now what? Where can you look for work? Here's a few of my favorites. Grackle HQ is a website that combs job listings from a lot of studios and consolidates them all in one place, showing when they were posted, the location, all that jazz. Grackle is probably my favorite, especially for larger studios or AAA. For smaller studios, check out the folks that work with indies. This job board is focused on smaller companies, which might be more approachable, depending on your experience level or what you're looking for. And then there's the jobs tab of good old LinkedIn. But beware, there's a lot of scams out there these days, and LinkedIn has a ton. In general, always keep on the lookout for a job posting that looks too good to be true or fishy. If you have to stop and ask yourself, is this a scam? It probably is. Trust your gut. Make sure you can verify a job posting with the careers page on a studio's actual website to make sure it's also listed there. I hope that this was helpful. I've included useful materials, including a cheat sheet of everything covered in this talk in the description box below. If you have other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try to get to them, or your fellow YouTube folks might be able to answer them for you. Also, if there's a topic you'd like me to make a video on, drop it in the comments. Because there's a lot of stuff out there about how to actually make video games, I'm thinking I might focus more on the professional side. I might make a video about how to build a game writing portfolio, or maybe an all-in-one GDC explainer or something, I don't know. This is also my very first YouTube video, so thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, dare I say, like and subscribe? Yeah, that hurt. I gotta go write something.